Hello and welcome along to TGP Has A Podcast. I hope you all enjoyed last week's episode where we had a chat with Owen Quimby about his trials and tribulations in the series, as well as his wealth of success in the Project Cars series. We've only got 2 more episodes left to come of this series, and funny enough, the 2 that we're having a chat with are both from the same small island just off the coast of mainland England. This week, we're having a chat with Luca. A very different character to Owen that we spoke to last week, but that certainly doesn't mean he's got any less stories to tell. He has had great success in the TGP2 series and has also competed in many other categories in the series. So here he is then, Luca Ciappelli. Enjoy. So Luca, welcome along. Thank you for joining us. You join me when we're recording this on a very hot, sunny summer's evening. It feels like the sort of time that we should be doing this over a beer in the pub or something. But here we are, nice and COVID secure in our home somewhere. And of course, Luca, this is your first appearance on TGP Has a Podcast.
It is, yeah. I've been really looking forward to doing this and just kind of sharing my views and my info and just having a good time. So
Good. Well, I hope we can have a good time. We've got some really interesting things to go over over the next few over the next half hour or so. That we're having a chat. Some big moments that you've been involved in the TGP series in multiple different disciplines. So I guess this brings me on quite nicely to my first question that I've asked all our guests so far. So how did you get into TGP series? How did it start all off in Luca's world?
well, I've known Dom for a very long time. I went to high school with him, and we were just in touch every so often after high school. He was obviously making the big time over in the UK. I was still over here, and we would see each other every Christmas or so. And then it was just in passing conversation that he had this TGP Series League, and I've always been into my racing games, and I was very interested. And a slot opened up on the original TGP Cars League that we did, and he got me into my first race. I think we were racing in like Formula Fords or something along those lines, and I can never. I'll absolutely butcher this circuit's name. I do apologise, but I think it was Oschersleben.
You've hit the nail
Um,
on the first go there. That's a great effort.
that's lucky. And probably my first memory from that was racing alongside another household name of TGP series, Jack Pearson, and just going around the long left hand sweep, and you came on the inside, and I ended up in the gravel trap upside down. That was my first ever taste of the TGP series, and I've never looked back.
Well, that's obviously a side effect sometimes of the close racing that we have here. That it can get sometimes a little bit too close, and that did that help you catch the bug even after that frustrating start to your foray in this series? Did that help ignite a fire that made you want to do more?
I remember being sat on the grid at Oschersleben and there being a full grid with people from all around the UK, from outside of the UK in Europe, um, and just thinking that I was part of something that was just so exciting and something that I'd never experienced before. Because I'll be honest, I never did any kind of league racing before that. I used to go on the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4 with a few friends from school and just have a couple of private lobbies, but never something where you were in a 15, 20 car lobby racing really hard, very close racing. And as soon as I got that bug, that was it. That I was hooked. I just had to be a part of that league.
No going back.
No going back. No way.
And that was all the way back in TGP Cars' early days, but all the way back in season 2, that you made your first foray with TGP series. Wasn't the strongest season you'll ever go on to have in your history of racing. I think something like 8 points was only the points tally that you picked up that season. But did that matter to you? Did you come away thinking that every race that I wish that I'd done more and I was frustrated, or did you go away thinking I wish I'd done more and I want to be able to be in a position where I can get more? I'm excited to do more.
At the time, it was I was in my effective rookie season and I was a newbie to the league. I was still learning the ropes, understanding the kind of people that I was racing against. And despite all that, I wasn't always at the back. Um, you know, with people 30 seconds up the road from me, I was still in tight racing. It's just I was still learning the ropes on how to league race because I think a lot of people don't realize when we do this that there is an art to it. There is a skill to it. You've got to understand how to race with other people online. It's not just a case of you jump in the car and you just go and race like you think you're on the road with a couple of other people around you. You've got to understand there's a discipline and there's a skill to it. So at the time, I was really enjoying myself, understanding what I was doing, and at the time, 8 points. I was happy with 8 points. Um, 8 points was more than no points. So
Exactly, it was eight better than you could have been.
exactly.
And what was it about the cars side of it that really got you in? Obviously, TGP is a little bit more well known for the leagues in Formula One, but was that not really a a league you were interested in at the time? Was it more the sort of touring car side of it and the multiple different cars that are competed in during a season? Was that more of what got you interested?
Well, I've always been interested in racing games in general, and that has ranged from the when I was on Gran Turismo back on the PlayStation 1 all the way through to F1 and some of the more kind of niche like Dakar Rally kind of games and things. So Project Cars was always going to be a game that when it was announced I was going to pick up, and I think it was being in the right place at the right time with the Project Cars League that I could have picked it up and entered in, and I enjoyed the game at the time. And the one thing that was missing from my kind of enjoyment of the game was being able to compete against people properly on an online platform as such. So that's kind of where I start. That's where I kind of wanted to go with it, and where I started with it, and why I enjoyed it so much. So
And well, it's still going strong today, of course. Now you continued persevering, shall we call it, with Project Cars, and we'll get closer and closer to taking the not the ultimate crown, but a little bit of crowning glory, shall we say? Um, and that elusive first win was occasionally very close, but still would be a little bit far away. How frustrating was that for you? As you were starting to get more involved in it and more into it, when you still had such a while to wait and such a time before the sort of podiums and the wind came through.
yeah, so I mentioned obviously earlier that the 8 points I was very happy with it, but when you start to get in comfortable into a league, and when you start to get into the groove and you understand your pace and the fact that you have competitive pace, you shift your focus and your attention more to getting that elusive win, that first win. And yeah, at the time it was frustrating. It was frustrating that there was always somebody ahead of me, or there was always a couple of people ahead of me, and that wasn't to say that I thought that they were slower than me. Don't get me wrong. There's some very very fast people in the TGP series, and they more than deserve the wins they get. But I just wanted that one chance, that one glimmer of hope to be able to get to the front and just have everything go perfectly. And yeah, it was a frustrating time before I did get my first win.
Well, it took another game. It took Project Cars 2 to come out. It took a change of regulations with the introduction of a single car discipline season, but it came on the streets of California around a track like Long Beach. Did you come into that race, thinking that you had a chance, or were you just sort of thinking, right, well, let's just try and get a solid result? And as the race sort of was going on, do you think, oh, hello, we got an opportunity here?
So I remember being in the Audi R8 for that season, and most races, I was nowhere near the podium or even the lead at the time. But I went into that race knowing that it was going to be a wet race, and knowing in general in racing that it completely shakes up the order and you have certain advantages at times that I thought there might be an outside chance. But I think at the time I qualified further down the order than I wanted to. But I remember that I was able to get lightning starts on Project Cars 2 in the Audi R8 at the time. And I thought to myself, if I could get a clear run into the first corner and get at least into third, fourth, then I had a good chance of competing for the win in that race. So yeah, I was confident in myself. If you don't have any confidence in yourself, I think it's going to be a struggle for you to be fighting for that win.
And did you see, as the race started panning out and it became sort of more clearer that you were going to be in contention for this win? Because this was, let's not forget, this was the first win that you took, and it went on to be the only win that you took in Project Cars. Was when that feeling when you crossed the line and won the race, was that more of a feeling of relief that you finally thought that you finally knew that you could do it, or was it a sense of what can this go on to do?
So I remember the race and getting into, I think I got into second position by the first corner of the first lap. And I was behind Owen, who was a very, very good Project Cars driver. That was his kind of game at the time, that he wipes the floor with a lot of people. But with it being wet and the conditions getting worse, there was puddles growing on the track. I knew that if I could stay close to him and either force him into an error or just seize an opportunity for when he did make an error, that I could take the lead from it. And I can't remember how far it was into the race, but I'd say about a third of the way into the race, he finally did hit a huge puddle that made him aquaplane.
Those
And
dreaded
completely
Project Cars puddles, eh?
exactly. And I was able to avoid the accident and take the lead. From that moment, then I had my heart in my mouth for the rest of the race, and there was always a mandatory pit stop that had to be done. And the quickest pit stop for me at the time was to take it on the last lap and to keep my old tyres on. And I remember that the soft cop was bearing down on the leaders because he'd made a good pit stop with his. He'd got onto fresh tyres. He'd made the time up, and I think he was within 5 seconds of the lead on the very last lap. And that feeling of being chased down and trying to stay cool under pressure was one of the hardest races that I think I've ever done. So
it's a fond memory,
there
I'm
was a
sure.
massive
Yeah,
sense of relief when I crossed the line.
I bet, and it was must have been a fond thought as well, sort of holding off the person who actually went on to become the champion, of course, that season. That must have been quite nice to have that in your arsenal as well. That you could hold him off, keep your nerve, and end up taking the win.
Yeah, and it really it said to myself that I was capable of winning races, because before that I hadn't won a race and I'd been so close to winning a race and it never coming to fruition. But now I was able to win that race, get that duck out of the way, and actually get my win tally off to a start. And my confidence only grew from there. So it was a big moment for me in my TGP series career that I was able to get that win and to go on to do what I've done today.
So, and you mentioned what you've been able to go on today, do today. Let's take a step away from Project Cars then, and let's take a look at what has arguably been your most successful discipline within the TGP series, which of course is TGP Dirt. Um, you mentioned Softy in Project Cars. You tried to come up against him, as so many have done, in TGP Dirt. How difficult was it going into a rally and competing against someone like Softy to try and take those rally victories when he was just a class above seemingly everyone?
I think you've put it very well there. he was a class above everybody. He just has this natural knack for the Dirt Rally 2 game, um, to just be unbelievably quick, but also able to keep it on the road and not crash the car. I think he may have crashed the car twice in the whole time that he was competing in Dirt Rally 2 that I remember, and they weren't exactly massive accidents that created terminal damage. He was just in another league, as I said, but going into the races knowing that he was so quick, it was very daunting. And every little stage win or split time where you were the fastest was something that you were like, yeah, I've really achieved this. I've done what I thought was the unthinkable at the time. And I think I did get some stage wins against Soft Cop at the time, and I was very happy with them. But yeah, as I said, he was in another league.
And it was a big turnaround for you as well, coming from Dirt Rally 1 to Dirt Rally 2. You'd struggled a lot on the first game, coming in comparison to the second game. Was that what was the secret to that? How was it you were able to turn your form around so drastically?
So Dirt Rally 1 was a very hardcore game. It was designed for people using a wheel. Um, it was even more unforgiving than Dirt Rally 2 was. And at the time, I didn't really understand the whole idea of consistency over speed. I think because people were so quick and all I was trying to do was trying to get up into the leading positions as much as I could. So I think a mixture of the Dirt Rally 2 was more friendly to people who were using a controller. Um, it was, you know, I was understanding the consistency aspect of rally a lot more, and the fact that that I'd invested a bit more time into the game to understand the mechanics. I think that really helped with my success in Dirt Rally 2.
And obviously that speed and that um, success did transform eventually into a title. Season 6, of course, the first season on the Dirt 2 game that we had without Softy. Where does that rate in your achievements of what you've done in TGP series, taking that title?
It was a very hard fought season. I had some great competitors in Phil Bardwell and Jovial Manatee at the time, and I remember
Can
going
you really call
absolutely
Bottle
down.
Job Bargewell a contender?
At the time, he was quick and he was consistent. I can't speak for necessarily for his current form. I don't know if he's just having a slight off season or, but I know he can be consistent and he can be quick. So I give him full credit, especially on season 6. And I remember going down to the absolute wire in Wales at the very last race, and all three of us. It was the first time all three of us were instructed by the stewards to go at the exact same time to ensure there was no way that there was any kind of advantage from anybody. And we were all so unbelievably cautious that none of us actually won the rally. It was only because I had placed ahead of Phil and Jovial Manatee at the time that I won the overall championship. Um, so I felt a massive achievement from it, considering how difficult the game is, how easily you can lose absolutely everything just by one crash. And yeah, it's definitely ranks high up in my achievements within the TGP series.
And you've obviously gone on to take a few rally victories in your time. If I remember rightly, 5 rally victories over the course of the TGP Dirt. You've you've always been known amongst the drivers of giving absolutely everything at every possible moment and never leaving anything on the table, which has led to a few rallies, perhaps you could say, lost. When you hear those sort of comments, what do you think when you hear people say that? Do you think, well, how else would I drive?
Well, I think season six was really something that shaped my rally career within TGP series. I remember Wales feeling great that I'd won the title and I'd achieved what I'd set out to do, and it was great. But I remember thinking back that the fact that I didn't win it with a rally win in Wales, I'd won it purely on consistency. And I said to myself at the time, am I enjoying doing it this way? And I think from then on, I said to myself that if I was going to win it, I wanted to win it and enjoy it at the same time. And yeah, I don't leave anything on the table. I do go 110% on the stages, but when I get that win, it just feels so much sweeter than if I just tootled around after the fourth stage or the third stage or whatever, just to make sure that I secured the rally overall win. It just doesn't feel right to me. So I think when I hear the comments, I fully understand people, having their constructive criticism on that, but it's just not the way I want to win in the rally.
And you'd never change that.
I don't believe so. I think if it came down to maybe another season six style scenario, I might change it that way. But I think the latest season kind of gave a good idea as to how I go about a championship normally. That I will drive 110%, and even if I were to consistently win, not go 100% flat out, I could have caught the leader. It's not how I wanted to do it. I've had the success in Dirt Rally 2 now. I've had that title win. I don't feel the need to just be tallying up the titles. I want to enjoy it before I have a title consideration.
Well, obviously, season nine, you could attribute to that 120% approach, I guess you could say. But as you said, what's the point? What's the point in making up the numbers? You've got to go for it, really, haven't you? And make the most of the opportunity you got. Because why would you want to be the calculated one? You want to be the quickest, don't you? That's the reason why you're doing this.
Exactly, and yeah, I think that's a good description of so how some people approach it. It's the calculated one, and this, that, and the other. But I've always driven very passionately, whether it be TGP cars, whether it be Formula One, whether it be dirt rally, GT Sport. I've always driven passionately, and I'm not going to necessarily change my approach by doing that. So
Well, you have had some successes in F1 as well, as we mentioned at the top of the show. That is something you've been a part of. Um, Before we get on to the sort of the TGP2 success there, um, I want to talk about your struggles in TGP1. Really, I think. Why is it that you think that you've never been able to convert any of the pace that you and race winning performances that you had in TGP2? Why is it you think you've never been able to take that into TGP1?
the step up from TGP2 to TGP1 is a lot bigger than a lot of people think. The skill. So the way I like to describe it is that in TGP2, if you have consistent good pace, then you will be probably top five most races, provided that you don't get caught into some kind of accident. But when it comes to TGP1, the consistent good pace is almost the base level of that league. And that's where you need to be finding the extra tenths, the extra half a tenth through corners, specific corners, to be able to get right to the front. And I'm I consider myself quick in on the F1 game, but the TGP one's just another level. There's such a massive step up from TGP2 to TGP1 that I don't think I'll, in my current kind of skill level, ever achieve anywhere close to the front on that in that league.
And we know from talking to drivers like Softy earlier on in this series, and Dan as well, that actually it does take a lot of time outside of actual the racing in the league to get quicker. Um, is that something that you look at some of those drivers who do put a lot of time into it to sort of enhance and improve? And is that something that you look upon as a good thing or a bad thing for the actual sort of quality of racing that you end up with?
When it comes to games like F1, I have absolutely no kind of issues with people putting the practice in to be able to get quicker and to enjoy, if they enjoy doing that, doing time trial lap after lap for hours on end to get better at the game. That's what creates such great racing in TGP1, because it is the absolute cutting edge of the pace for the TGP series going against each other. I'll never be able to get to a situation where I'd be able to put in that practice and to be able to um, enjoy being able to do that, because of various commitments I have in my life and things. And at the moment, I don't enjoy running around time trial. I mean, I told people in the past, when it comes to TGP2, I might start the game up 10 minutes before the lobby opens for the night and have a quick lap just to get my eye in, but I would never kind of do what a lot of people refer to as sweat the game in order to improve my pace as such. So I hats off to the people who have the time to do it and really gain something out of it, because it clearly shows that that's how you get to the top level.
And you obviously mentioned the other commitments in life and TGP2 there, of course, as well. Um, you've competed in a lot of TGP leagues, TGP1 and 2 included as well. Have you found yourself wishing that you'd been able to do more? I mean, not saying that you haven't done very much, but you competed in quite a lot. But do you sort of wish that you could get your teeth into it more, or are you quite happy with the sort of the commitment that you're able to put in at this stage?
I think I'm very happy with the commitment that I can put in at the moment. There's times where I've been running two, possibly even three leagues in the same week at once, and I think that is pushing as much as I want to be spending time on the TGP series. The TGP series is absolutely fantastic. I love the people who race in it. I love how it's organised. It's done incredibly well, but it's not something that I want to invest more time in at it, because it's very, there's a lot of concentration and a lot of effort that goes into actually doing racing. A lot of people think you sit there on your sofa, you have a beer beside you and you just race along, but no, you sit there, you're actually physically sweating at times when you're racing, and you're so mentally focused to trying to get the win, trying to get the next place, that it takes it out of you. And I think if I did any more, I would burn out. So I'm very happy with the amount of commitment that I have at the moment.
Well, it's worked for you, because you've had a few accolades over the time, two TGP2 championships, um, and many a race win to go along with that as well. Rather poorly on my part. I can't remember how many TGP2 wins you've had right at this very second, and I'm having to scramble through my documents that I have in front of me here to try and find what it is that you do have, as it's a poor showing on my part. Um, but how much does TGP2 mean to you? How much does the that league in particular? How much do you value that?
Despite starting my TGP series career in the Project Cars game and TGP Cars as the league, TGP2 is my home. And as much as I've thought, yeah, I've been promoted to TGP1 to compete against faster people to possibly improve my skill level, I'll always have my home in TGP2. And I remember when I was competing in TGP1 and not doing very well, and seeing TGP2 racing being so close and competitive and fun compared to what I was experiencing in TGP1 at the time. I was desperately pining for it, and when I got the opportunity last season to come back to TGP2, it just felt great. And I've never experienced a league like it that just is so open and effectively great racing and welcoming from the community in that sense. So I have a lot of love for TGP2, and I'll be sad the day that I won't be able to compete in it again.
24 race wins in TGP2. He finally is able to find a bit of paper with that on. And it's good that you mentioned that about TGP2, because that's the way that a lot of people see that league, and the way that I think that a lot of people are able to enjoy it so much that it is maybe that more sort of pick up and play and enjoyable side of the TGP series. And as we said, obviously you've had great successes in that, and unfortunately your first title was a little bit marred by the circumstances around the final race, which obviously we did a separate podcast on in Series 1, which you can go back and listen to. Before we sort of get too much into what happened and your sort of thoughts and feelings around that, when you look back on that season and winning the title, has it been marred or damaged at all by what happened in the last race?
Luckily, I don't think about that season too much, and the kind of repercussions that came out of it. But when I do look back on it, if I were able to change it, yes, I would in a heartbeat change it to a title in a way that it wasn't marred by the events that did happen in that final race. But would I change it so that I didn't actually win the title for that? Absolutely not. I I look back on that whole season and how it was the season that I really came into my own for my winning streaks in TGP2 and my pace and the hard racing that I did in that season. And it'll stay with me forever as to how much I enjoyed it. And it really was a foundation for my love for TGP2, despite the events that did happen at the end of the season. So, yeah.
And do you have any resentment towards CJ for how it ended up? Obviously, he ended up getting excluded from the title anyway, so no matter what would have happened in that those final few laps, corners, um, that title was going to be yours. But do you have any resentment towards him for what happened?
Absolutely not. He was a hard racer throughout the whole season. He really, really challenged me, and I like to think that I challenged him as well. And when you're a racing driver and you do everything you can to win, and I fully understand that, it's not personally the way that I would go about racing, and that's just not my personality. But in terms of resenting him for the events that happened, yeah, at the time I was very frustrated, very angry. Um, I thought I was doing the right thing, but if I were to speak to him or see him tomorrow, there'd be no resentment from my side, absolutely not. And I'd thank him again for challenging me so closely for that title.
And then the second title, then you mentioned how coming back for season 27 was so nice and enjoyable. Um, the only thing I can think of for you in that season, I'm afraid to say, was your quote at the beginning of the first night. And if no one's heard that, Luca said, "I'll be happy with a podium this season." Um,
Yeah.
and Luca actually went on to win the championship by 22 point. No, no, it wasn't. It was more than that, wasn't it? It was. It was 37 points. 37 points, clinching it in the penultimate race. Are you pleased that you won that second title after what happened in the first one that you won?
I'll be honest, when I went into that second title season, season 21 was never on my mind. I was just so happy to be back in TGP2 and competing with household names that I've grown rapport and relationships with over the years. That I was just very happy to be there. And just to explain the quote, when I was in TGP1, my confidence was well and truly knocked out of me. All that confidence that I built up in TGP Cars and the original TGP2 title that I won was completely and utterly knocked out of me, because at many, many races I was absolutely nowhere. So I genuinely, deep down in my heart, believed that I just didn't have the pace anymore. I thought I'd peaked. I thought that was it. So to then come back into TGP2, not knowing relatively where I was pace-wise, I was genuinely going to be happy if I got one podium that season. And obviously, it transpired that I think in my first race I actually got a win.
Won the first race
in Abu Dhabi.
So eight
yeah.
wins went on to, 7 more wins went on to follow that. 8 in total for that season, as well as 3 pole positions. Do you pride yourself on your consistency in the race over your 1-lap pace? Is that where in TGP2 you've always been and excelled and done well at?
Absolutely. I think if you were to look back at the stats, that I've got the 24 wins in TGP2, but then if you look at my pole records and my pole numbers, it's significantly lower. And I think ages ago I decided to try and work out what the conversion rate was pole to win, and I think I was something ridiculous like 350% pole to win ratio.
Wow. Gosh.
And I can only put that down to the fact that I'm holding consistent pace throughout the race, trying to avoid the accidents as best as I can, and just being there at the right time and making the clean moves in order to get into the higher positions. So yeah, it's definitely something I pride myself on, my consistency and being able to bang out the lap times again and again in order to be up in those positions, and just making the right calls on strategy as well. Because one famous quote from Dom himself when it comes to TGP2, anything can happen. Literally anything can happen. So you have to be in the best position you can be for when that does happen.
Well, you've got to be there at the right time and in the right place, and you were more often than not. You kept your nose clean, and you had some great pace along the way as well. I had to fend off challenges from the emerging Sam Hickman, and obviously Jack Pearson, who is just as consistent in the Mercedes as he was. How was it sort of facing 2 very different types of people there, in terms of Sam Young, very quick but didn't quite have that consistency yet, and then Jack on the sort of flip side of that, still very quick but sort of definitely focuses more on the races than he does in qualifying, and how he can best progress himself up the field. How was it sort of facing two drivers like that?
I think you've missed out a very key name there from the title challenge I had, and that was you.
It was
yourself. So I had 3. So I'll talk about all 3. And Sam Hickman, being the young in his rookie season, I believe for TGP2 as well, kind of showed very quick pace, but the consistency just wasn't there, unfortunately. And like I'd like to compare back to my original TGP Cars season, there was a lot of learning going on with him, and he made the odd mistake, as was expected as such, and I think that's ultimately why it wasn't as close with him as it was maybe with Jack and with yourself at times. So when it came to Jack was very clever. He was very calculated in a lot of the things he did. He had the pace there. He was very consistent. He also utilised his teammate a lot of the time as well, in order to be able to help fight for the higher positions, and to be able to play not only the team game but also to help him propel himself within the championship standings to be able to compete for the title. So Jack really showed his experience in the league in that specific season as well, to be able to stay up there and to really fight against me for it. And then obviously coming on to yourself, one thing that I absolutely love about TGP2 and what makes me yearn for it more and more is the close racing. I'll never ever forget the race we had at Vietnam, the
Great
worst track on the calendar by far, was completely and utterly just made this amazing racing venue by the fighting that we had over those few laps around the pit stop windows. Um, and I think if I had to choose a moment within my TGP series career that I enjoyed the most within the racing, it had to be that fight in Vietnam in the last season alongside you. It's exactly what makes TGP series what it is, and it makes it what puts a massive smile on my face and a huge excitement to be able to get behind the wheel every Wednesday night and to just compete no matter what the track is on TGP2. So yeah, I have to thank you for that.
Well, my pleasure. I'm just gutted that you won. Um, I would have loved to have had that win, even if it was around the worst track in the world. Um, well, Luca, we've had a fantastic look back on your time um, in the TGP series. I'm gonna ask you a few quick fire questions. It's a round that I've done with everyone so far this series, and will continue to do as well. Well, we'll just look over a couple of few things. So the first question: favorite track to race at? Any game?
Hungary F1.
Hungary. Interesting. Why Hungary?
It's a track that I just love to drive. It's very flowing. I've always been relatively quick around there, and when you nail the lap around Hungary, in my opinion, there's no better feeling.
It's very fluent. You're right, and it's a good feeling. You can really attack that track, and if you have a good car underneath you, it's good fun as well. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this one. Least favorite track?
Yeah, Vietnam for sure.
That's answered that one then. Um, what's been your highlight of TGP, your career so far?
Yeah, as I mentioned previously, it has to be the close racing within TGP2, and especially that specific Vietnam race that we had together. Um, if I could choose a whole kind of series of moments, it would have to be the close racing within TGP2, and effectively what makes TGP series so good, and what makes it so good for people accessing it as well.
Least favorite moment?
Least favorite moment would definitely have to go to season 21 title decider.
Two polar opposite points there. Um, who is you talked a bit about drivers that you like coming up and racing against. Who is someone that you always fear coming up against a little bit when racing, and you see them in your rear view mirror, or see them coming up to them on a track? Who's someone that you don't really enjoy racing against?
It's a tough one, that. I don't think there's any specific people that I fear. I think I generally fear people that I've never raced against before, because you don't know how they're driving, what their driving style is. You don't know if they're going to be aggressive. You don't know if they're going to give you the room. So if I was to answer it, I would say somebody I've never raced against before.
Very good answer. And then lastly, we know you're a big fan of games like Assetto Corsa and things like that. What's a league, or what's a game where you'd love to see a TGP league in the future?
There's two games that I've got for this answer, and the first one would be Assetto Corsa Competizione. It's a game that is so realistic feeling and so kind of all down to the driving skill, that it's something that you would absolutely love to be able to just completely immerse yourself in, and there would be no setup. well, I would set it in such a way there'd be no setups that are giving advantages. There was nothing kind of along those lines that would muddy the waters. So Assetto Corsa Competizione would be one, and the second game would probably be WRC 9 is the one I'm thinking of, because that's the current WRC 9 game, but I'd love to just see a rally league within that. Just because I enjoy the game so much. It's, in my opinion, better than Dirt Rally 2. That's a controversial opinion in some people's books, but
We love a controversial opinion.
But it's definitely a league that I would absolutely love to see set up.
Brilliant. Well, Luca, I feel that we could be chatting about this about TGP all day. I've had to shorten this down as best I can already, as there are just so many things that I'd like to talk to you about. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and hopefully we will see you back on the podcast again very soon. And obviously on a track again very soon, competing. It's always good to see you out there racing everyone, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again soon, and see you out there. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to being able to do this podcast again and being able to discuss further as to my ideas and plans for the future.
Well, there we have it. Luca Ciappelli. What a fantastic chap. Always so many stories to tell, and his love for the series is as evident now as it was when he first joined it those few years ago. Well, here we are then. The end of the penultimate episode. We've just got one more left in the series, and we couldn't be talking to someone who was more instrumental in the creation of TGP series than anyone that we could find. It will, of course, be Dom Smith, and we had a really good sit-down chat with Dom a couple of weeks ago about the series and about all that he's enjoyed as part of it and all that is still to come. I really hope you enjoy our chat next week, but in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this chat with Luca, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.